Did you know that readers are leaders? I am a firm believer of that, and I want to share with you one of the books that I have enjoyed tremendously in the last few months. This is a book written by a friend, and most of all, someone that I respect immensely. The name of the book is The Rest of the Man's Show, and it's a deeply personal and powerful memoir that chronicles Pastor Bill Lamoury's transformation from brokenness to redemption and ultimately to a life of purpose and leadership. And this book is going to help you have the practical wisdom and spiritual practices and mindset shifts so that you can heal, grow, and lead a life of significance. So check it out. You can grab it on Amazon or anywhere that books are sold. And I would love for you to support this incredible individual. Remember, The Rest of the Man's Show.
The Rest of the Man's Show offers inspiration and instruction to help you push forward. Releasing April 8th. Get your pre-order now so you can be inspired with one of the most fascinating stories of brokenness, redemption, and transformation. If you're not being called a mama's boy, you're not doing it right. Dan Collins.
Welcome to Casa de Confidence, a podcast for you. You'll hear some incredible women
And some awesome, cool dudes.
going confidently in the direction of their dreams and living in the purpose of their heart.
You're our host.
Julie DeLucca-Collins. And you are our sidekick. # handsome hot husband.
That again.
And the producer of the show.
That I am.
I am an author, speaker, coach, dreamer, and most of all,
We help people go in the direction of their dreams.
and support them on their purpose. So pull up a chair
Grab a drink.
and make yourself at home because our casa
Is your casa. Welcome to Casa de Confidence and happy Mother's Day. This is Dan Collins.
and this is Julie DeLucca-Collins.
Good morning, Julie. How are you?
I am doing well, Daniel.
Good. So, hey, Julie,
Yes, Dan.
happy Doggy Mama Day.
Oh, I was wondering if you were going to say anything today. You know, I was waiting for the dogs to give me something, but apparently they forgot.
Are the boys all huddled around you right now, though?
Yes, the two are sleeping under, and the other one is sleeping to the side, as always, so he can keep an eye on me.
Well, I told them while we're recording that they need to huddle around you and give you love.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
So,
You say so.
there
Well, they
you
give
go.
me a lot of love, but oh my gosh, were they obnoxious this morning?
Mm.
You know, I was trying to do some meditating, and they were barking like there was no tomorrow, especially Yogi Bear Collins. He was like, it's nice out and I'm going to bark at everybody.
Mm. Well,
Anyhow.
you know what? I had a great day yesterday with you and your mom.
Oh, we
You
had
know,
a very nice day yesterday.
We had some amazing Peruvian food in West Hartford, Connecticut.
Yeah, well, you know what I found out? Well, first of all, I've heard of the restaurant before, but for whatever reason, we really had not been. And my mom loves Peruvian food.
Yes, she does.
And of course, we went. And the name of the restaurant is Cora Cora,
Mm-hmm. It's been there
which
quite
means full of weeds.
What?
It's
What's it mean?
It's a city, I believe, in Peru.
Mm.
The capital of the district of the same name. And it means full of weeds.
Oh.
And the restaurant originally opened in 2011, but it has now been taken over by the children of the original owners. And by the way, and I know that you said you didn't know that, and you didn't know who James Beard was, but the restaurant has been nominated for the award of James Beard Award, which it's a national award that recognizes chefs and restaurants all over the country, I guess. And it is a big, big deal to actually be nominated for that.
And if you're ever in West Hartford, Connecticut, you know, Cora Cora is a great place to grab some great Peruvian food.
It sure is. And by the way,
I had it. Okay, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that speaking of nominations, I was nominated for the Women in Podcasting Award for Top Podcaster. Not to toot my own horn, but I will toot my own horn. Because if I don't, who does, right?
Well, if people don't know, you got to toot it, and then they can toot it now that they know too.
Well,
know what, Julie?
Yes, Daniel.
Toot, toot.
I'm going to ask the listeners to please vote for me. I would really, love to be, it's great to be nominated, but I would really love to win the award because podcasting is something that I am incredibly passionate about. And this podcast and the podcast that we bring through the podcasting services is something that I believe really creates connection. It also creates this incredible way for us to learn about each other and to grow as individuals.
So how do they vote for our podcast and for you?
Well, they're voting for me.
Yes, of course. But
I am going to put the link in the show notes. So,
all right.
If you're on my email list, I would also love it if you go and, check it out on my email list. So. And I will be self-promoting for a while because I just love my podcast. It's like our little baby, and I want to get the word out there that we have some incredible individuals. Well, like our guest today.
We have 2 individuals.
Mm-hmm. And I can't wait to talk about them because, from the moment that I met them, I love their story. I also love their journey, and I love what they are doing today. So
I can't wait to hear the podcast because I want to see if you actually pronounce their name correctly.
Really? Wow, boys and girls.
I'm not sure how to pronounce it myself, so I'm going to take a stab at it. Today we have Dr. Ann Drenitsaris and her daughter, Heather Drenitsaris Hilliard.
That is correct. And by the way, the story of this mother and daughter duo is that Heather really was searching for her roots because she was simply looking for her medical records that led to an exciting new adventure. Anne gave Heather up for adoption. And she placed her for adoption in the hope that she had a future and that they would hopefully reunite in the future. And they had an emotional first meeting. And they first talked about, the recognition and the instant connection. And of course, redefining their relationship. Now, they work together, by the way, which I think is very, very cool. That's also are co-authors of a couple books. But I have really enjoyed getting to know Anne over the course of the last couple of years and can really resonate with some of the work that they're doing because, it takes a lot of courage to really be able to, number one, build yourself, but also work with someone that you are close to. And number 3, again, give the people around you some of the tools that they need to navigate life, overall. And by the way,
hold on, Julie. Someone special just walked in the room. Your mom.
Well, this is exciting that we get to introduce my mama to the world.
Oh my goodness. Well, to the world, it's a good time to say hello, a happy Mother's Day. Okay.
So tell the listeners a little bit about you. What is your name?
Oh, my name is Maria Teresa Rivera, and I was born in El Salvador. Now I stay with my daughter Julie and the other 2 daughters that I have, one in Miami and the other one in Georgia. Yes, I'm happy and very glad to say a blessing for everybody. Thank you.
Well, Mom, wait a minute. So tell me a little bit about you. What is one of your favorite things that you have done other than having me as a daughter?
Well, when I worked for the American Embassy, and then I moved to the international fair in El Salvador, and
That's where she met my dad, by the way.
that's where I saw him. And the funny thing was that when I saw him, he asked for me because that's where the people and where he was working to say to ask for me. And when I saw him, I said, I am going to marry this guy. And we did. And we have 3 beautiful women. And so we're very happy. Thank you.
Well, absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us at Casa de Confidence, Mom. And we're going to take my mom to brunch soon. But certainly, we wanted to give her the opportunity to say hello.
Okay. Thank you. Blessing to everybody. Thank you.
Okay, that was fun.
That was fun and exciting.
So, Julie, I think that's a good time to get on to our interview.
It is a good time to get to our interview. However, Daniel Collins, I am so glad that you are my husband, even though you're mama's boy.
Well,
she trained you well, though.
My mom trained me well, and blessings to my mom in heaven.
Now, listen, just a question. What is the one characteristic of your mom that you feel created the deepest impact in your heart?
Wow. Probably her patience with me.
Oh, you know what? God bless her. I'm sorry, Dan.
I was a good kid, but there was moments. There was moments where I was a
good kid, and there were moments.
There was moments where I was a bit rebellious, and the thing.
You were rebellious?
The thing when I was a little younger, there was a moment, and but yeah, as far as my mom though, for the listeners that don't know, my father passed away when I was 6, so it was just my mom and me. So that was, a lot of work for her, and I appreciate the work that she had to put in, especially when we lived in Maine and we were away from most of the rest of the family. It was just her, but then we came back down to Connecticut, and I had all my nephews and nieces, which are my age. So I was kind of like an only child, even though I'm 6 of 6. But I had those nieces and nephews there to spend time with, and my brothers and sisters contributed to who I am now. And that was only possible because of the hard work that my mom put into them when they were younger. So anyway.
Well, perfect. So I want to leave a final thought with the listeners, and this is a challenge that Heather, one of our guests, left us with. And that is to take one small action toward what's been on your heart. Because sometimes letting go of control and trusting the process, if development is the most important thing we can focus on. And that is advice from Anne, our second guest.
All right. So on to our interview with Julie, Dr. Ann, and Heather.
Okay, welcome back to the show. Today, I want to read you a little something. Our guests today said that they are a mother and daughter team whose reunion in 1995, almost 28 years after Heather's adoption at birth, was the inception of their remarkable collaboration. They know that they have a truly unique relationship and truly unique story. The story is at the heart of what they do. And why they do it and how they remain resilient as a mother and daughter team, destined to shape the lives of others. They say that a relationship between a mother and daughter is both unique and challenging. Trust me, I know that. When they are able to shed their roles as mother and daughter, becoming adult friends of different ages, they can be spectacular. But imagine taking this sometimes tumultuous relationship and adding the ingredient of 28 years of separation. Heather was given up for adoption at birth, and then taking the relationship into the business world, where within 3 years of meeting, they look back after 23 years of being reunited and are grateful every day for each other and the lives they have built together. Welcome, Heather and Anne. I am so grateful to have you here, ladies.
Thank you for having us. We're excited to be part of this conversation with you here today.
Well, Heather, I think that I would hesitate to work with my mom. And I love her and we have a lot of fun together. But working with someone is an intimate relationship. Before you tell me, the path to working with your mom, you were separated for many years. How did you reconnect?
Yeah, but I would agree. I would never in a million years, you couldn't pay me enough money to go into business with my adoptive mom. Love her, but it would never happen. Anyway, I was actually getting married. I was engaged, getting married, and thought, you know what, maybe this is a good time to understand more about my family's biology, medical history, those sorts of things. And up here in Canada, we have the ability to go to the agency that managed the adoption and request our medical records. So I had done that. And then I got a call from the adoption agency saying, "Oh, I've got your mom and your grandma here." So I went from thinking I was going to get a bundle of information. Let's all go. So everything sort of fast forwarded. And, again, it was that obviously meant to be, right? It was meant for us to connect. My grandmother was registered, Anne was registered. So it was easy for them to make the connection. There was no hunting involved. My paternal grandmother had continued to update my medical file there with the adoption agency. And the adoption agency actually does a really good job of facilitating that initial connection. You do an exchange through them of information and pictures and stories. And then eventually, although Anne and I kind of skipped ahead that's a bit, but it's the way it went, and it's been great ever since. It's been a long time. So
amazing. I have a story of reconnection as well, but before we even talk about that, Anne, how old were you when you gave Heather up for adoption?
Just 1 week shy of my 17th birthday.
Wow. I cannot imagine going through having a child at 17. There are so many different things that are going on. And did you at that time think sometime in the future, I'm going to find her and reconnect with her?
Yeah, I always had that thought. And up here at 18, you can reunite.
Okay.
And that's when I registered with the adoption agency. And I was anxious every time I thought about reuniting with Heather, because at that time there were certain things that hadn't fallen into place and I hadn't really gotten myself settled in my life. At that young age. And so, of course, just the thought that I might have this reunion with Heather and not be prepared, and what that would create for both of us. So, when you think about destiny, like our destiny, our sacred contract, and coming together at the time that we did, when it was actually perfect for both of us. Not that it was easy, but it was perfect.
Yeah, I think that there is a time when things just kind of fall into place. I mentioned that I reunited with a family member. My dad was married before he married my mom. He was married twice. My mom was number 3 of 5. And he had 2 sons from his first marriage. And I always grew up knowing that I had brothers. I had this fascination that I wanted to have an older brother. I was the oldest of girls. And I thought, I need an older brother. But of course, growing up, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have all these resources. And my grandmother was the only one who kept in contact with him. My dad's mom, when she passed, there was really no connection. And my dad and his first wife were not in the best of terms, and she didn't want to have anything to do with him. So there was no way for us to kind of connect. And I remember that I would look in the phone book all the time. How crazy, right? And I could not find any DeLucas in Florida with two C's. There were only with one C. And I thought, I am alone. I didn't belong, even though I did belong. I had a family. And it wasn't until randomly one night, 2000, and I think 2008, I looked on Facebook and I said, you know what? I'm going to look to see maybe I can find my brother. And I typed his name, and this person came up, and I thought, this has got to be my brother. He lives in Louisiana and he looks exactly like my dad. But I was so intimidated. I was so intimidated to reach out and to even have a conversation. So I cannot imagine this is a brother. Now you're talking about a mother. What was that first interaction like for both of you ladies?
Well, I'll start. Yeah, I think it's interesting too, because when you grow up adopted, no one looks like you, no one sounds like you, and in my case, nobody else's personality was anything like mine.
Wow.
So there is that aspect of sort of, and it's not that I was sort of seeking to replace something. It was curiosity. And I'd been raised with this understanding of it was okay to seek out our biological. I have two adopted siblings, and that was the approach that our parents took to it. But I think what hit me the most, and it was actually even before I met Anne, I called to talk to her, and I got her answering machine, because it was an answering machine back then. I got her answering machine.
Yes.
And I remember saying to my fiance at the time, I'm like, she sounds like me.
Ooh.
it was that sort of, and then as we met, it's like that, wow, it's like the similarity of not just, voice tonality, but mannerisms. There were mannerisms that we shared, even though I hadn't grown up as part of that ecosystem that was her family.
Mhm.
And having someone who has the same, not exactly the same personality, but a more similar personality and thinking style to me
Mhm.
than anyone I grew up with. And I said, I think that's was the most fundamental aspect of it. It's like, wow, there's people like me out there. and so I that's always a bit of that challenge of when you go into this setting is also, it's not, I still remember Anne had invited her whole family over, and there's a lot of them for the first time. And I remember looking in people's faces and actually seeing my own reflected back. And that's a very sort of shifting moment where all of a sudden you realize there's people in the world who look like you, right?
Talk about belonging. Talk about finding your people in all sense of the word. What was that like for you, Anne, when you saw Heather for the first time? I mean, you have already been with your family, so you're just bringing her into the fold, I guess we could call it. What was that like for you?
Well, given my personality type, of course, the first thing that I did was I read everything I possibly could on how to do a reunion properly.
Yes.
And getting books, and because it's so fragile, the recognition Heather didn't need a mother, the potential there for rejection. The potential for, saying something or overstepping. And, when there's no clear role definition, how do you go into a familial relationship and navigate those uncharted waters? And so, sometimes I think maybe I shouldn't have read as much as I did and just let it unfold a bit more. But it was like I was, a million feet off the ground. I wasn't even in my body. I was so excited when I first saw her at the airport. But I remember getting the picture and going, "Oh my God, she is so precious, so cute." 27-year-old woman. It's like that's what these feelings that came up around somebody I didn't even know, but who had belonged to me that I gave up for adoption. And so everything that we went through to establish our bond was really helped
Mhm.
along by our keen interest in helping people achieve their potential.
Wow.
And
I
that formed the basis of it, because the mother-daughter thing wasn't the front and
right,
center.
right. I could
Yeah.
imagine. And I'm picturing this interaction in which, again, you are both coming in to explore, and I see curiosity, right?
Yeah.
You wanted to kind of see where the dance would take you, per se, correct?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
Exactly.
no agenda. There was, I
no
know from
agenda.
my end, it was purely like, and it could have gone, and,
Mhm.
obviously we've heard lots of horror stories with things
Yeah,
like
Oh,
this.
I could
yeah.
imagine. Yeah,
So,
for sure. I've heard them as well. I was afraid when I looked for my brother. Number one, my dad, nobody really knew I was looking. And when I found him, it was, I think, refreshing for me, because I kind of felt like, oh, I did something and I was excited, but I also felt like, oh my goodness, did I open a can of worms? Is my dad going to be mad? What am I? And then I remember when I finally did speak to him, I actually reached out to his daughter-in-law first, and I wasn't sure if it was the right person. And then, of course, his son wanted to know, my nephew wanted to know, like, who are you? And I said, look, I don't want a kidney. All I want to know is this is my brother. And then when I finally had the conversation with my brother, again, he, for all intents and purposes, had grown up without a dad,
mm,
and that there was a lot to navigate there.
Yeah.
And then he said to me, he was so beautiful. He's like, I am so happy I have a sister. And I thought, well, actually, you have two others. And it was a good place, but not everybody has these stories.
Yeah.
Heather, you alluded to your adopted mom. What were her thoughts on this? Because that's part of the relationship, right?
Yeah, and it's an interesting dynamic because, from the time I could comprehend, I was always told that I was adopted. It
Okay.
was really obvious between myself and my siblings that we were not genetically connected in any way, shape, or form. But
Mhm.
the and I still remember she had this really great book set that we could read. Like, one was written to the child, the other written to the parent, about how do you talk about the fact that your child's adopted and what does it mean. And my
Mhm.
mother's expression was always, you're a gift that I've been provided, and you're a gift that I may only have for a certain period of time. And there's these other people that you are connected to. So I think, that always gave us this level of permission where we would
Mhm.
not be in any way, stepping on her toes. So that was how we were raised. The reality of it was a little bit different. She found it tough for sure.
Yeah,
I
of
think what she
course.
found tough too was that I could have a relationship with Anne that I could not have with her, because she and I are so fundamentally different
Mhm.
that the level at which Anne and I could connect on was really different from her. And so I think there were times where it was okay and times that she had a hard time. My dad had a tough time with it too.
Mhm.
Um, and again, hard to explain to them. I'm not trying to replace, I'm just trying to, enhance and extend. And I think because Anne and I went into a relationship quickly, we connected quickly, and it sort of snowballed. She was at my wedding. We went from, meeting in March to her being part of my wedding at the end of September. And so everything happened fast. They didn't have a couple of years to adjust to some integration. It was like, boom, these
Right.
people are front and center.
Right.
And so, yeah, so we navigated that, and, there's been sort of ups and downs with it. But I think fundamentally for me, even, it was hard to sort of think about Anne as my mom,
Mhm.
because in my mind, it's like, my mom's my mom, like my mom. And I remember Anne and I having this conversation where there's no rule that says you can't have more than one mom.
Yeah.
And that's true. And you think about families today, right? There are kids out there that have, moms. I know my kids, they've got a dad and they've got a stepdad, and so they've got two dads, right? And
Right.
so but at the time it was sort of, because I was so much older, how do you transition into this reference point of, yes, Anne is my mom? And so if you look at the journey we took, there was a lot of, even when we started our business, we didn't tell people that we were mother-daughter. That
Okay.
came later, right? So it's
Mhm.
a thing that we had to kind of grow into and get really comfortable. Whereas I think it was easier for Anne because I have always been her daughter.
Mhm.
So even though I was not with her, I have always been her daughter. And so the reference point, is different for both of us, right?
For sure.
Yeah. You talk about working together, and you have been affectionately talked to by your clients as the Oracle or Yoda, and you've been studying for a lifetime, trying to understand the evolutionary and developmental psychology in of personas and business practices. And Heather, were you drawn right away to the same field? And I know that you are a facilitator, strategist, and definitely someone who has been in leadership. Tell me more about how did you begin to kind of construct this collaboration and working together?
I'll start and I'll get into ad. So I actually came up through business. So my whole thing was all about business and marketing, but my focus was when I went to business school and I have a degree in business administration. And when I came out, it was like I wanted to do something in the business space that still had to do with people and how people behave and what it is that make people tick. That's kind of always what I've been drawn to. And I went from there into human resources and then from there into consulting, because someone told me I should be a consultant and not in HR. So that's the path I took because they were right. And so I had a curiosity about it, but my approach was sort of more the organizational systems and designing from an organizational lens. And when I'd actually started to take some psychology courses off. Well, back then they sent us videotapes to do it, like
Yes, I
out of
remember
learning
those
kind of thing.
days.
But anyway, online, the precursor to online. And so when Anne and I met, it was like I had this inherent curiosity about it. And I was really actively engaged in reading everything I could about self-help and behavior and how do we develop and grow as human beings and all of that. And so Anne coming in with her background, it was like, well, this is the missing piece, right? I always laugh that Anne gave birth to me to kind of, sort of, she's got all this, I get to follow along and play in that space with her, right?
Right.
But so that was sort of the genesis of it, is that she was working with individuals, and really understanding behavior and what drives behavior and how do humans develop. I was looking at it through the organizational and systems lens, and it was sort of like this perfect bringing together of
Yes.
what it is that we really need to do in organizations to drive change. So.
So good. And any other things that you want to contribute to what just Heather
Well,
shared?
to add to that, and Heather and I always talk about the two sides of people and results in organizations, and Heather coming up and already being in organizations, and me starting to make some headway at the time into a leadership coaching practice in organizations, but not necessarily having that business background or performance systems that Heather is so gifted at putting together and conceptualizing. And so it was just this natural marrying of everything that's actually needed in organizations to engender high performance and to foster cultures of, people really becoming their best self and doing the work that they're meant to do. And Heather can language things in a way,
Right.
I'll talk more from that psychological, and Heather will put it into a language that sells it into the organization and then creates the systems that the psychological stuff can come into.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that in retrospect and looking at my own personal journey as I was in that corporate environment, you can create change for yourself, right? We know that we can change our brain, and that's possible. We can definitely, as an executive, when I started to work with a coach and I started to go through my own personal genesis, I found that it was a challenge to come into an organization, and that first of all, there were a lot of already intrinsic habits that the organization had in the culture. And even though I was making the changes for myself, it was a lonely place to be. Even though I tend to be quite strong and want to create that ripple effect. Sometimes, it's not easy to create change if you're the only person that is changing and evolving. Have you seen that within other organizations?
Oh yeah, without a doubt. I mean, the there's usually one person that brings us in, but it's the dynamic, right? It's the dynamic that you exist within, and it was even part of what prompted Anne to when she was seeing what her psychotherapy clients were struggling with, it was usually because of something to do with their boss. So making that transition into working with individuals in the organizational context made a lot of sense because you want to start to affect that sort of change. But this is why we always look at tackling it from that place of, what do these people really need in order to make that shift? And we look at it from a lens of, personality and brain organization from that perspective, the emotional drivers and then the psychological needs. But then we also look at what's the system that will support it, because even on our own, we know, like, as much as we might want to change our behavior and shift our behaviors, like there's other things we need around us to support it. And so just sort of saying, well, I want this to be different isn't necessarily going to make it so. And we see the struggle, and also sometimes that expectation that focusing on other people changing so that we can change, as opposed to simply saying, what can I do? And then how do I make myself be as effective and satisfied within the context that I am? And part of it is accepting what I can't change, but learning how to navigate within that as effectively as possible without having a personal impact. It's one of the things we teach all of our clients is to stop personalizing the behavior of others. Just stop, because
Best lesson I've ever learned.
Right?
Best lesson I ever learned. I think that when I stopped assuming that I knew what somebody else was thinking and that there was an agenda to what they were doing, right? My life changed. And it was really, I was the one who changed, not even though, again, we want to create the change in the environment, but the environment doesn't change unless we do the work for ourselves. And then when people see you evolving, then they hopefully can start to say, well, what are you doing? What's different? And that can help. You talked about that we need to have certain things in place to change. What are some of those things, Anne?
Well, and just to add to what yourself and Heather have said, it's also stopping taking responsibility for what other people might feel, as though people can't handle their own emotions, or we don't have the skills to effectively navigate a conversation where someone doesn't like a change or someone is resisting. And this is where it comes back, and we look at ourselves as leaders and say, what skills do I need to develop so I can be more effective at dealing with resistance and initiating change? You see, because so many, you hear it so often, it's, oh, I can't do this, so-and-so won't like it, or, we can't have performance reviews, our employees are going to get so upset and they'll quit. And, this isn't evidence-based. This is simply, I don't like doing performance reviews, so I'm going to make up this really cool story.
Right.
And I'm going to tell everyone that, and everyone's going to believe it. And so I don't have to do performance reviews. And it's just a story that we're telling about it.
We tell ourselves a lot of stories.
Don't we?
in and out of the professional environment.
Truly. So I apologize. Can you restate your question?
No, absolutely. I love our conversation. It's great. What do we need to do to change? What do we need to have in place?
Well, as I was saying with both Heather and I coming together, it's recognizing that we need systems and we need the internal, the content, and that understanding of what drives our own behavior and what our triggers and our resistance is actually going to be. And so for all of our programs, whether it's a performance system or individual work, we always look at where people are, what the current reality is, and, creating that position of what's their desired future state and getting a really clear picture, and then looking at what is likely to happen once they start on the journey. What will their resistance be? And, then starting with a roadmap. Because the roadmap has to be in place. We can't change by just saying, I want to break this habit. You
Right.
know, it's like, okay, well, the brain abhors a vacuum. So what are you going to put in its place? You know, you just can't say, stop telling yourself you're a loser. You have to tell yourself something else.
You have to do that.
And so there has to be, you know, a real understanding of this is going to take me out of my comfort zone, whether it's organizationally, culturally, on a team, or as an individual. Anytime we say, let's change this, somebody's going to resist. And knowing it in advance and knowing how we're going to deal with it in advance helps us navigate those waters to where we're actually getting excited about changing behavior.
I think that, it's our natural inclination to want to resist it. But the one thing that, especially with clients, one of the things that I help to coach them on is, as entrepreneurs, you may need to change some of the patterns and behaviors and ways in which you are showing up. You're going from maybe being someone that reported to someone, being told, okay, you need to do this, this, and that, to then now you need to change to be the person that sets the tone, to makes the plans, has the goals, and all of that. But they have a difficult time changing from the one role, from the person that maybe is the doer to the visionary, or to the integrator also. The one thing that I have found that is incredibly helpful is to really tapping into that future self. And what does that look like? What is your aspiration? And if you're tapping into your aspiration and you ask the wisdom of that future self, well, what did I do to be that person? And then you start to create those small incremental steps and celebrate everywhere along the way, then it becomes easier to start that change and evolution. But again, it's not something that happens overnight.
Well, and because change creates a circumstance in us where we don't like the way we feel about ourselves. Like going to learn something and recognizing that you're not the smartest person in the room. Or as a leader, an entrepreneur, somebody saying, you have to slow down and teach me how to do this. And I don't like the way I feel when I'm teaching. Yeah. I want to keep running. And so it's so experiential and emotion driven. And we have this tendency to look at change as simply from a systems perspective. If we know how to do it, then we should just be able to do it.
Yes, it's not, it doesn't happen like that. Heather,
I wish it did.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You know what? We would be billionaires if we could bottle that up, and people would just be like, okay, I need that. That's exactly that. I need to take that pill. Many individuals, no matter where they are, and this is such a reality of the human condition, we have to power past that sabotaging thought that we have about who we are, and that inability to think that we can be, right, what we can, or what we are working to become. So, or that imposter syndrome. How do we move past that?
Well, I think that the first thing is to really understand that what the imposter syndrome and the symptoms of that, of which there are quite a few, is recognizing that it's a developmental gap. Like, it's not this thing. It's not who you are. It's not who I am. It's this place that we've gotten stuck in our development. And as we talked about earlier, we have the ability to grow and develop and change our brains as human beings. So we have to do that work that's involved. And one of the first things that we talk to our clients about is really understanding at the core who they are and what their potential is. Because a lot of the times there's this message track that we developed when we were children or as we were growing, strategies that we use to survive, because of course that's what we're supposed to do in our childhood, is survive our experiences and make sure that we move beyond that. But we develop these patterns. We have these messages that perhaps were given to us by our parents, and we've learned to adapt ourselves in order to do that. But we bring them through into our adulthood because we don't stop to question them or challenge them. And those are the things that our brain just keeps throwing back up every time we have a situation or we get triggered. It's like, things like, well, who do you think you are? And why do you think you can do this? And don't you know your place, and whatever it might be. And that I'm not good enough messaging that comes in and then leads to other pieces. And so the path is really simple. It starts with self-awareness, starts at really understanding your imposter syndrome script. So what's the story that you keep telling yourself? What are those automatic negative thoughts that come up in those situations? And then learning actually how to shift or reframe it into something positive. As Anne said, our brain abhors a vacuum. It's not enough to say, yes, I am good enough, or stop telling myself that. I need to say, well, what's the objective information we're going to start to work with? And it's also moving into this place of really having our own sense of entitlement and empathy for ourselves. I mean, we talk to ourselves in ways that we would never in a million years talk to anyone else. And so it's really recognizing that pattern in ourselves and starting to make those changes. And again, same thing. Where are we starting from? Where do we need to grow through? What's the roadmap for getting there? But I think the most important thing is in that, when I look back myself, because, as someone who struggled with it for a really, really long time, is my favorite was, I should have known, right? And I remember Anne saying to me, like, what are you, a superwoman? Like,
Yeah.
And it's like, wow, that's an objective way of looking at it. And so instead of saying, well, I should have known, it's like, well, how should I have known? Like, is that realistic for me to tell myself I should have known, right? As though I'm all powerful and all knowing. And it's by stopping that automatic thinking pattern, right? And putting something new into its place, and then saying, okay, what am I going to do with this next time? And how do and then all of a sudden, these things that I know that, I use typos in presentations where I would have been like mortified and devastated for like days when I was in my 20s, where it happens now. I just laugh about it. I don't need to be perfect. I'm human, right? I'm human. I can focus on being a human. And so there's things that, again, but looking at it through that developmental lens is really important. The imposter syndrome is not something you just get over, or you stop thinking of yourself in that way. You have to do that developmental work in order to be able to get there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was asked to speak a couple of weeks ago on a topic that, again, I'm familiar with. It's not something that is new to me, but the topic itself, the title of the presentation was very different from what I would normally have pitched, right? And even though the themes are pretty much the same, I found myself thinking, who the heck am I? Like, what am I doing here? Like, I need to go and research this more. And the more that I would research, the more that I would think, yeah, I knew that. Okay, I knew that. But it was like, it doesn't end. What are some ways in which we can kind of pattern interrupt these things and the behaviors that we are so prone to fall back into?
It's such a great question, because we often have this expectation that if we know something, that will automatically change our behavior in our brain. And it doesn't, because anything that evokes uncertainty can trigger a self-protective pattern in us. And the Buddhists have this wonderful concept called the observing self that we cultivate through mindfulness. And I talk to clients, and I write about this a lot, about, that there has to be that where it's sort of like in your brain, you take a step back and you observe what you're thinking and what you're telling yourself. And you start having a different conversation based on observing, what am I telling myself? I don't know myself. Of course I know myself. What's the insecurity? What's the uncertainty? And let me attend to that, which at the same time, in your example, Julie, you can see how you were attending to the uncertainty to reassure yourself that you knew it, but it was just naming it differently. And that we know when we're in our emotional brain, and we have to upshift when we start to tell ourselves these stories.
Yeah.
The comparisons, the judgment, and people aren't going to like this. And, oh, I wonder if it's what they'll really want. And, there's all kinds of things that we can say. And when we pause, it's like that pause, right? Let me observe what I'm talking to myself about right now. And by doing that, I can upshift to my rational brain and get some clarity on what's going on and what I'm frightened about.
Yeah. I love the phrase, I am telling myself a story. And it has been so helpful to me to create psychological safety, because I'm giving myself sort of this permission to be human and to not beat myself up for what I'm doing, and also acknowledge that, oh, okay, I'm doing this again. I'm telling myself a story. I have to say that the best thing about what I do now is being able to see that if we create these small shifts, we can increase our confidence in anything that we're doing. Do you see more receptibility by organizations to be able to, for instance, bring in some of the mindfulness practices that, again, I think that 20, 30 years ago, if you said, oh, we need to take a moment to meditate, and we need to take a moment to breathe or ground ourselves, people would have been like, what the heck is wrong with this person, right? You're a little too out there. But is there more receptibility to some of these practices now?
I think it depends on where you go. I had a coaching client the other day say to me, you don't believe in that mindfulness crap, do you?
Yes, I hear that.
I said, I don't have an active meditation practice, but I do believe that there are strategies in the mindfulness practice that are really useful to us as human beings. And it's understanding what they are and taking that in. Because I think that's part of the challenge is, again, that resistance, that natural discomfort that comes up. I know even when I started working with Anne, emotional intelligence wasn't quite a thing yet. And she started talking to me about, fears and, we need to go after people's fears. And I'm like, I'm not talking to my client about fear. I'm not. There's no way. Now, here I am 20 years later. Every single day, I'm talking to my clients about the fears that are driving the behavior and how we need to get at those fears. And so it's just so that language starts to get a little bit more normalized because it's around work. Okay, we've moved. But again, it's just that natural resistance when and I could see it in my client example I gave you, because she's worried that I was going to make her do something that right now is out of her comfort zone. And
right.
So instead, trying to give her a couple of little things that are so easy for her to start with. So you don't have to swallow it whole. You can just take this little bite right now that you can use in that moment. And that's how, we manage it. But, organizations are investing far more today than they were 20 years ago on emotional intelligence, mindfulness. The big one today is psychological safety in the workplace. And leaders aren't equipped. They have no idea what that means or what that looks like, or, and employees are throwing that language around like you wouldn't believe right now, at least in my experience with some of our clients. And it's got everybody scrambling, because what it does is it causes fear. Because the leaders don't know what does that mean and what am I supposed to be doing? And does that mean I can't get upset with my people when they screw up? Like, what does this actually mean, this whole psychological security thing? So I think there's a lot more around it, but I think for most leaders, it's still not a skill they have developed. It's not a set of skills. And because of that, the resistance continues to be there around it.
Yeah.
Well, and one of the things to add to that is in Heather and my work together, we've really made a concerted effort to legitimize the importance of recognizing needs, legitimizing needs as drivers of behavior, because when our needs aren't being met, our behaviors change.
Absolutely.
And you can't feel safe. You can blame your boss for not creating psychological safety. At the same time, you're not taking responsibility for saying, there's certain aspects of my role that are no longer meeting my needs, from that objective perspective, and really owning your own development, your own growth. And so with mindfulness, people always associate it with meditation.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, I used to for sure.
And the pulling it together with cognitive behavioral exercises and practices, and mindfulness just being a very, very small component of it, is one of the main ways of changing the neural pathways in the brain. And, if a client wants to tell me a different way of changing neural pathways in the brain, hey, I'm all over it. But it's like, I'm going to reject this, but I have no idea.
Yeah. There's such resistance. Yeah. And there's such resistance. I actually have a client who we're going through and she resists emotional intelligence so much. And she said she's a brilliant woman. And she's like, well, I just don't think this works. Why? And she's very pragmatic in her ways. And I I talked to her. I said, you are the triage in your office, because when somebody in your organization is struggling with something, you are their supervisor. They're going to come to you first, and knowing how to be able to create safety for them. That one, they're, because if they don't feel that they come to you and their job is jeopardized, they're going to feel like, I don't want to come to her. And then they're going to continue to struggle, and this can continue to snowball out of control, whatever might be going on with them. And I think that that's the one thing as supervisors that nobody's really training us on. Is that something that you are bringing into organizations to really help the front line, in essence, managers, to really be able to support their employees in this?
Yeah, and I think we're always really mindful about sort of that. It's the intersect, right, between me as an individual leader, right, and what's my personality, what's my natural orientation. Because we could also have leaders that go the other way, where they're overly empathetic and they are overly collaborative and they're overly maternalistic in their leadership approach, and we sort of got to pull everyone into the middle, where there's a little bit of balance within there. But if our leaders don't understand why they resist some of these things, or why they go into that over emphasizing and collaborating and being permissive, then we don't actually get to the behavioral change that we need. And so it is always a combination of, what are the words that I can use? What are the tools that I can use? Like, do I have a framework? Do I have a planner? Do I have a way in which I can structure my conversation, because I'm not comfortable with that? So we're trying to equip them with those things that break it down into those smaller pieces that allow them to really be able to do it. And, I will say that, for someone who is, left brain thinking preference from a Myers-Briggs language perspective, empathy is not something that comes naturally to me or at all. So I have, and Anne will attest to that. So I have to work really hard. And sometimes I have to be reminded that this is a moment in which I need to be empathetic, as opposed to, but I now have language I can use. I know words that I can bring forward in those settings that require it. It doesn't mean that I am more empathetic. It means that I've learned the skill to behave in a manner that demonstrates empathy. And so I think sometimes there's that ask we have of people. We're not meeting them where they're at. Sometimes we have these unrealistic expectations that leaders should be all these things to everyone, as opposed to saying, okay, here's who you are, and here are some of the ways in which you can sort of bridge that gap between that and what you need to be able to do in order to be effective in a way that feels authentic and comfortable enough that I can pull it out and use it. So, because I'm never going to be empathetic like my sister is. And she's never going to be as objective and, depersonalizing as I am. And so, but we both have to learn those skills in order to be effective in our roles and in our situations. Right. So you're on mute, Julie.
Muted.
Thank you. I'm muted. I was coughing, so I had to mute myself. It's that time of year, it's springtime. My allergies are acting up. It's that adaptive behavior that for me was life-changing when I learned what my DISC personality was. D. I'm a D, I'm an I. So I'm very great with people, but I'm also a D, and I can run people over. But I had to learn that I needed to be a little more detail oriented, that some of my teams needed to have things very broken down, and they needed to feel that safety. And as a leader, I needed to adapt to that. And it's very important to have all of these tools. You have co-authored several books, Who You Are Meant to Be. Leaders aren't born, they're developed. So You Think You Can Lead is your other book. And then Power Past the Imposter Syndrome. Now, I could talk about these books all day, because first of all, they're on my reading list now. However, what was the process of writing these books together and co-authoring? Because I know it's a difficult process, at least for me, it was very humbling to write a book. but now you're collaborating with someone, and you're collaborating with someone who you have a deep ties to. Tell me more about that process.
So it was interesting the way Who Are You Meant to Be came into existence, because it started out with me being contacted to write an article for Oprah magazine. And they wanted a quiz to talk about who you are meant to be. And Heather and I had been working on combining emotional intelligence with the psychological types, with the MBTI types.
Mhm.
And we're already working with it, but hadn't quite named it the striving styles yet. But once the article came out and it became very popular in the Oprah world, we were contacted by a number of publishers who are asking, "Are you going to write a book?" So
Ooh,
we
okay.
decided to write a book
It makes total sense.
that really connected up emotional needs as the drivers of behavior,
Mhm.
different with each of the four quadrants of the brain.
Mhm.
And so, you know, in our collaboration, the way Heather and I work on all of our books is that, you know, some of the emotional side of it, the theoretical side, you know, I'll put together, and Heather will put together the plans and the structure and, you know, how to take this forward and actually action it. So You Think You Can Lead came out of our work in organizations and recognizing, you know, one of the people in a graduation from our Leadership Foundations program made the comment of, you know, I always thought leader, you know, you just show up and you learn by osmosis. It's how to be a leader, and that most people do it like that. And so we set about to create a how-to,
Mm.
or, you know, everything that you need, the 6 pillars of leading with authority that we define in our book. And Heather, you can talk about the last one.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. Anne's the prolific writer, right? So, and she's also the one that has this ability to pull together all of these different things into the system. And sort of my work with her is to sort of, as she said, like, how do we translate some of that out so that the audience can really work with it? Is it and what's the steps and the actions and the sequencing of the steps and all of that stuff that my brain does a little bit more naturally. And so when we went for the third book, which was all around the imposter syndrome, we were doing a lot of work it just, we have a lot of clients who were struggling with it, and it just became a major topic in a lot of our conversations, particularly with our female leaders. It was seemed to be coming up a lot with our female clients. And so it was sort of this culmination of our own experience. So we really brought more of ourselves and our own journey into this one. And how did we move our way past it? I mean, all of our books have stories from our lives in it and our own experiences. But I think this one in particular, because, we were out talking about the fact that, we'd gone through this journey ourselves, that we struggled with it. We worked and came up with a system that we could follow and that others therefore could follow in order to be able to move through it. So, same sort of thing. Anne would create that we talk about the different for imposter syndrome personas and that the system behind it, but then what do we then do to developmentally in order to move along that path? So, but yeah, it's lots of fun. It's it's when we got our first one, it was like, oh, this is amazing. And then I was like, 3, and Anne's just written a couple of more that are about to be released. And so,
ooh, how exciting!
I think it's one of those great ways and great opportunities. And we have a series of books on reports about personality type and brain-based leadership and career development and all these sorts of things. And I think it's just this great way that we like to collaborate in order to share what we know and what we've learned with a wider audience, because you can just reach so many people when, it's like podcasts and videocasts and, but books are something that are there and that are tangible and real sense of pride in being able to accomplish that in the course of our 25 years that we've been working together. So,
well, it sounds like you've been working together for a lifetime, but certainly, it's I think there's so much more to come here. You are both very prolific creators, and you are really helping organizations with a really want to hunch approach. I don't even know if that's the right, but both of you are coming in with exactly what an organization needs. I think that there's many a times in which maybe we're getting a little bit more of this, less of that, but we need to look at the whole person. And then we need to look at it as an organization as being that whole person too. Many of us live our lives in that autopilot, and bringing the awareness, being able to then have the right tools to move that autopilot and live the life of our dreams. And this is what helps us be a little more confident every day, is that we know that we are moving in the right direction.
Yeah.
And my sweet spot, I've always been working with entrepreneurs because they're more likely to really get how if they don't change their behavior, their organization is going to suffer.
Yeah.
And that they seek development as long as you can keep it within the context of their comfort zone. In building up the systems, once they grow the business to a place where they actually need systems, or they are not going to grow.
Yeah, I'm a systems girl, and sometimes it drives my clients crazy, but I totally agree with you. Systems are the bedrock of any good business. And it doesn't mean, and this is the thing, right? You have to be adaptive. If you're a right brain, you have to do the other stuff. And if you're the left brain, then you have to get really comfortable with the other. Lucky for me, I do have my husband who's the total opposite than I am, and we tend to complement each other. But when he's not here, I have to really be able to step into as the CEO of my business. And if I don't follow the systems, my customers suffer, my business suffers, and then I suffer because then I start to going into overwhelm and burnout. And that's not helpful for anyone.
Well said.
Yes.
So amazing. Again, I could talk to you all day. This is my jam. I am so grateful that we have connected. You definitely need to stay in my universe and be part of our family here at Casa de Confidence. I do believe that there's a lot of listeners who are going to take away so many good nuggets from what you have both shared. What is the one thing that maybe I didn't ask that each of you want to leave me with?
Oh, I think the one thing is that, and I say this all the time, is that thing that's rattling around in your head. It's like, just take one step, one action, towards it, and stop sort of pushing it off. But really, I think that we hear that so much from folks. They've been thinking about it, and yet they don't get the help they need. They don't, take the first step towards anything. They don't even write it down. So if you do nothing else, as you close off on this show here today, it's like just thinking about that one little thing that you can do, even if it's writing it down on a Post-it note so you can carry it with you, that just take action.
Very nice. How about you, my friend Anne? What do you want to leave us with?
Well, we have this tendency, and I've been thinking about this one a lot, about, how we like to believe that we're in control, and our comfort zone gives us that sense that we are in control of something, as long as we stay small and stay, in going down the paths well traveled. But when we shift our brain from that desire to be in control to having faith in the process of development, faith is that intangible that you can't see, you can't touch it. There's no defined result, but really having faith in oneself on the path to becoming who you're meant to be. It's that one critical ingredient that control will keep us in the same place, but having faith in achieving our potential will keep us on that road to who we're meant to be.
I love it. It's incredibly wise. Thank you so much for sharing with us. Now, where can the listeners find you, and what is the best way to connect with you?
So our website, dranetsaris-hilliard.com. So hopefully you'll put that in the show
Yes,
notes.
we are going to have that in the show notes, and we're going to tag you on all the social media platforms.
I won't spell it out in here. That's the easiest place. Everything to know about what it is that we do, our expertise, our books, our podcasts, everything is there. And also contact forms so you can reach out to us directly. You can also connect with us on LinkedIn.
Amazing. And I am going to go do that myself. Heather, I did want to ask you, did you envision that this was going to be where you are after you connected with Anne?
No, I think it was interesting because it never occurred to me to be an entrepreneur. Just wasn't sort of in my space growing up with my family. And back then people didn't talk about this entrepreneurship thing because I'm totally aging myself now. But anyway,
no, you're fine. You're in good company.
So, I think having Anne and having that opportunity to partner with Anne probably gave me more courage than I might have. I mean, I'd always been entrepreneurial as a kid. I was always coming up with business ideas and figuring out ways to make money when I was a kid, but it didn't translate out. And so I think that my path definitely changed a lot by having Anne and I have a relationship, because I would have just totally kept on that path of climbing the corporate ladder otherwise. Right. So,
well, beautiful. Thank you, ladies, for being a part of the Casa de Confidence show and the Confident You Radio. It is an honor to have both of you. Thank you for your willingness to share your story and to be agents of change in our world. I so appreciate you. And don't forget, my friends, make sure that you connect with both Heather and Anne. We'll have all the information in the show notes. They are in LinkedIn. Go ahead and send them a message. Let them know what is the one thing that you heard today that you are going to implement. Maybe that one little 1% change that can get you going, because the more that we start to move and integrate what we learn will help us go confidently in the direction of our dreams. Thanks again, everybody. Until next time.
Thanks for listening to Casa de Confidence. We thank you for listening, and if you want more, go to casadeconfidencepod.com. Check Julie out on her socials as Julie DeLucca-Collins. And you can also check out her website at goconfidentlycoaching.com. Have a great week, and don't forget, go confidently in the direction of your dreams.
Hi, everybody. I know that sometimes we get very lonely in this entrepreneur journey, and I want to invite you to join us into our limited time only Purposeful You Mastermind. For many of us entrepreneurs, we believe that we can do it all, but the reality is that doing it alone only creates a lot of overwhelm. So join us at the Purposeful You Mastermind. You can find out more information by going to bit.ly/Julie's Mastermind. This is going to be the place where you are able to then unlock your full potential and achieve long-term success for your business, push you behind your current limits, expand your connections, discover new ideas, and implement them with confidence. You're going to get the support in all aspects and transforming you to the six-figure business you've been looking for. Pause and get off the hamster wheel if you've been spinning around. This is a time where you can get that support from like-minded entrepreneurs that are here to join you in your journey. Together, we can challenge the assumptions and land the speaking engagements and opportunities we want to grow our business and make an impact in the lives of people. See you then. Remember, you can find the mastermind at bit.ly Julie's Mastermind.